and welcome back. We're going to be doing an interview over a game, and today we have Dogwood Gaming. So my name is Jake, and do you guys mind going down the line and telling us your names and your titles?
Sure. I'm Sam Martino. I'm the CEO and one of the founders of the company.
I'm Sema Koga, and I'm lead artist.
And if you want to quickly say your name.
I'm Tyler Ulsh, and I'm the creative director.
Perfect. All right. So before we get into this, tell us the background of your, how you guys got started.
Yeah. So I was in my second to last semester of college, and I was doing political science. I had gotten a recommendation to do law at Georgetown. I was going to go there and be a lobbyist. And I had friends whose parents were very high up lobbyists in different companies in DC, and I've never seen such miserable people in my life. And my thought was just, what's the point of working so hard? You have all this money, and then you're miserable. What's the point? So I was playing Dungeons and Dragons with a couple of my friends, and we wanted to play in the Mass Effect universe. We were all big Mass Effect fans, and we couldn't find anything, so we said, we should try and write our own, just as something to do. And it was 103 pages based on Dungeons and Dragons 3.5 of how to play that in the Mass Effect universe. We had a whole bestiary and everything. And after that, we were like, what if we tried and made video games? Like how hard could that possibly be? And so one of the other founders and our writer, Dave, I was at his house one night, and he was like, okay, so we make this game, and it's nature versus technology. And I was like, okay, do we have anything else? No. All right, and that's exactly how we got this game. And I mean, honestly, the whole thing was started. There was a cafe on Rockville Pike called Sam's Cafe, and I started going there 2014 when I was in college at Montgomery College, and I cannot tell you the insane people that I met there. My entire studio, everybody who works for me for the most part came from Sam's. Seme I met in high school, but Tyler I met at Sam's. I think a dozen other people I all met at that cafe, and it ranged because, I mean, all kinds of people. We were talking about it earlier. It was like one of the servers, Jimmy, he was our musician, and this guy came in and he was drawing Nintendo characters, and Jimmy was like, oh, what are you doing? He's like, oh, I got this commission from Nintendo and I'm working on this. And so Jimmy's like, oh, that's cool, we're doing a video game too. And this guy, his artwork, David Loebman, is incredible, and to this day he still does all of our concept artwork. He did this image for the game, was from him, and he was just a guy working on a commission in Sam's one night, and then he ended up doing it. Or I met this girl who she was telling me she was going through college. I was like, oh, what are you doing? Motion capture editing. I'm like, what? Yeah, so she, of all the specialized things, and then she ended up coming and doing motion capture with us because we met her there. It was because all the people were just people we met who came and worked on these games with us.
That's really awesome. Sorry, I got caught up with the fact that you guys were doing 3.5. That is a throwaway.
That really dates me there because that's what I was playing on before we shifted to Pathfinder.
I was going to say there was Starfinder, but I'm guessing that wasn't out yet.
No, there was Starfinder, but we wanted to play the Mass Effect universe. We had things for how you could modify the Normandy, because we had taken the Mass Effect 2's upgrade system and then made that in a D&D setting so you could upgrade your ships and customize it all, because we wanted to be you were in the Mass Effect universe.
Okay.
And that we just gave out for free, and we got such positive reception on it that we just kept making games after that.
That's really cool. One of you guys will have to teach me how to do 3.5. That is.
Oh, you're not missing
that's
much.
Fair.
It's
okay.
nothing special.
That's good. That's good to know.
But this game is really special to all of us because it's the first video game we ever worked on, and it was entirely done by people that just did this because they loved it. I met all these people at various points at Sam's at one point or another, and they all contributed in different ways. And you'll see as Tyler goes through it. I mean, it's just a hodgepodge of stuff. It's really, we set out doing this with none of us knew how to program. None of us knew how to make video games. And that's a huge issue for people because I mean, I know growing up, I always loved video games, but I never saw it as a possible career path because I'm awful at math. I cannot do math to save my life. Like I passed the lowest level math credit requirement at Montgomery College to get by. Like I can't do math. And so I was like, I can't make video games because I can't do like the programming part of it. Well, in RPG Maker, it's not, you don't have to write like code as much. It's all visual based. And I could understand that. And we were like, oh, we can try RPG Maker. But there were just so many issues with RPG Maker because this was back in 2015, 2016, Steam had this system called Steam Greenlight, where to get a game on Steam, you either had to be an established publisher like a Rockstar or an EA or somebody, or you had to get enough votes through the Steam Greenlight system to get it onto the Steam store. And RPG Maker, people would literally just go on RPG Maker games, write RPG Maker trash, downvote it, and then the game would never come out. So working in RPG Maker was a death sentence for like anybody who wanted to release a game because your game would never be able to get on Steam. And if you can't get on Steam, the PC market's pretty much non-existent. So we were like, how can we make this different enough from an RPG Maker game with the skills that we have? And that led to, we had David, who did all the concept art. He hand drew all of the character portraits, so none of the character portraits are from RPG Maker. Aseme custom made all of the unique weapons, so all the weapons have like custom frames and scripts and everything. The guy who ended up programming the combat, his favorite game is Chrono Trigger. He is obsessed with Chrono Trigger, and I wish I still had the spreadsheet of our combat formulas because it's insane. Like you would look at it and you would say, yeah, this is somebody who's played Chrono Trigger. Like it's really like, it's just a massive Excel sheet of all the different formulas for how the combat works. The music I could go on forever because that's one of the most bizarre things with this game, and I hope I can point out more of it as we go through it. But when we were at Sam's, this guy came in. We'd never met him before, and a song by Future came on the radio. And he's like, oh, I worked on this. And we're like, yeah, okay, you and everybody else has walked in here. like sure. And he's like, no, look it up. And we did, and he has a producer credit on this Future song. I'm like, what? Like, what are you doing here? Why? And he's like, oh, I just moved to Virginia. I live here now. And so this guy was producing music for Eminem, Kanye, like huge people. And the thing is that he would call me and he'd be like, hey, Sam, I just sent this song to Kanye to be on Life of Pablo. He bounced it back because he didn't have room for it. Do you want the song? I'm like, absolutely. Like, are you kidding me? We have like a song that was supposed to be on Eminem album in here. Like, all the music is like high-end production stuff that was either he had in his catalog or it had been recently bounced back from somebody. And then on top of that, I had the fun job of painting every single map. Because one of the biggest issues that RPG Maker has is they have like a tile set system for how you make all the maps. Mm-hmm. So all your maps look the same. It's very different to make them look special. So what I did was I did the basics in RPG Maker, exported them out into Photoshop, painted on the bushes and the trees and all the rocks and everything, and then imported it back into RPG Maker. And we hit the map cap for the engine, which is 1,000. So it's... Wow. I am so proud of this, with it being made in RPG Maker. I think to get 100%, it's like a 200 to 400 hour experience, I would say, to fully beat the whole thing. It's probably 40 to 60 hours per playthrough. We did a lot. The story is longer than Final Fantasy VII. I can very proudly say that.
Very nice, very nice.
It's really something because we all made it wanting to make a Mass Effect style game without the tools to be able to make a Mass Effect style game.
Before we start playing, is there anything else you guys want to add?
He was correct.
Aseme, he did a ton of the artwork for us for Ashes, and you'll see a lot of the assets in the game were done by Aseme. It was Aseme and Ibu.
Me and
Sonia. So what it was there was a Seme and Ibu who would draw the assets for us. Like if I needed something custom that I couldn't get off of a sprite sheet from somewhere, like a pool table or a statue or a gargoyle or something, a Seme and Ibu would draw it, and then Sonia would go and watercolor the whole thing from college in New York and mail me back the watercolor drawings, and I'd scan them into the game and pull them in as Photoshop stickers.
Wow.
It was a lot. It was a lot to do.
Okay. All right. Well, you guys want to get into
Yeah,
this?
please.
Right.
So Tyler's here. He has played this game the most. We have a Twitch channel, and he played the whole thing on stream, 100% of the entire game.
The writing, I remember, was that all Dave?
Yeah,
or-
start recording.
So Dave wrote a lot of it.
Thank you.
And one of our like dreams is we want to be able to remake this in Unreal Engine, and we had started the process, but what an undertaking! like really to go from, because we look at like the original script, and Dave, who wrote the vast majority of it, he didn't know the limitations of RPG Maker. So there are like story beats that are like, wow, this is really incredible, but how do I can't do this in RPG Maker. There's like no way to possibly do it. And there's also all of the dialogue, all of the side missions and everything is unfortunately not written anywhere else except for directly into the game, because there was a point where I was like, someone has to do all of this. I guess I'm just going to do it. And so I wrote everything in.
Right.
And it's so like when we were trying to move stuff from this to Unreal Engine, it was a lot of having to open RPG Maker, find the text boxes, copy everything out, paste it back in, because this is the only like version of where all the stuff exists.
Right.
Yeah, so like when I was saying I had to do all the painting for this, so like I would put the floors and the walls in, and then all the terminals and the things on the wall and everything, those I would hand place in Photoshop, because otherwise you wouldn't be able to get them to look like that, because the tile set restricts where you can place things.
Really?
Yeah. And see all the character portraits, those were all done by David Loebman. 'Cause otherwise you have to use what's built into RPG Maker. So we were trying to do as little of that as possible. I tell you, trying to name every single NPC. Oh my goodness.
I believe that. I mean, it's hard with Dungeons and Dragons anyway, so then you start coming up with like Goblin 1.
Yeah, well, like if you ever want, like I think it's really funny if you want to see like a like microcosm of what was going on between like January 2016 to when this released in like the spring of 2017, because when I would work on this at Sam's, and so I'd be on my laptop and they would have, I think it's up on the clock. Yeah. They would just have like the TV running all day, and so if I needed a name, I'd look up and be like, all right, that's who it is. And so like there's so many like Sean's, and because wasn't that Trump's first press secretary, Sean Spicer?
Yes.
I would always like, so it's like Sean's, and like whoever I'd look up, be like, oh, that's the reporter, and like that's where all the names came from for most of them.
Was Bones playing when you did this one?
No. So all the companions, which I'll get into in a second, because I actually want to talk about the classes real quick for this.
Oh.
This was something. So we have 15 different classes in the game. So there's melee, combat, magic, and firearms, and so each one has five different like subclasses within that.
Okay.
And most of the combat work that Steve did when he was programming this was making all the classes feel good, because that was so hard to get them all to be viable. It's just like, it's a JRPG, so like we have classes that are just support. They're just buff characters. Like they're not, it's very difficult to try and actually play it like as the main character. I think Tyler chose one of the good combat classes, so he'll probably blow through everything.
Well, I know that we had to nerf this class.
Well, I can't.
Yeah. Well, so when Tyler ended up playing through this the first time, I mean, it was great because he 100%ed the entire thing. So I was able to actually find all the issues with it, because there were things that like you've got to do something very specifically to have this problem show up, and there's no way I'd ever know unless he did something super specific. So with the combat, this was not what we wanted combat originally to be. So with RPG Maker, this is made in RPG Maker MV. All of the previous versions were programmed entirely within Ruby. as the programming language. When they switched to MV, they changed everything over to JavaScript. So all of the plugins and everything that had been built for the engine years prior all stopped working. Because this was all originally designed that, like, we have 50 plus companions, let's have it play like Fire Emblem, where you're like, it makes sense to have this large group of people fighting with you.
Right.
But the plugin that made Fire Emblem combat possible stopped working because Ruby wasn't supported by RPG Maker anymore. So we had to completely redo the entire combat system to try and work around that. But I mean, I think what was nice about it was we really learned, like, I learned a lot from doing this, and not just it being the first like video game I made, but like you really have to work within limitations of what you're doing, because RPG Maker has hard caps on things. Like, you can only have 1,000 variables, which that sounds like a lot of variables, but when, I mean, you know, like if you're doing like a JRPG, you're gonna hit 1,000 choices pretty quickly.
Right.
And like that was a huge issue we had, where like I had to be considerate of that towards the end of the game, where I'm like, oh, I only have this many pages that I can actually like work with still.
Right.
What are you looking for, Tyler?
I missed the.
Oh, there's these. So we had to make a special item just for Tyler. I think it's the. Yep, there it is.
There you go.
So we had to make they're called sanity pills, and they work as a repel, because there is so much combat in this game that like trying to get through it is like it's a grind. You know? It's
okay,
like,
that makes sense. Yeah.
So like it was like after I think probably the first 20 hours, Tyler was like, "Yeah, I'm gonna I'm gonna go and use the developer tools."
All right, that's fair.
But I mean, this was really. I'm just looking at all this again. It's like having to place all of this, and like it was a lot. And because like all the decorations on the table and everything had to be hand placed. I can tell like that food tray is was done probably by a Seme or Ibu. You can see the ones that have like the outlines.
Right.
Whoa,
the
no,
watercolors.
not the food tray. That ashtray. I think I still have the sketchbook.
Yeah,
With the
the
ashtray
Seme kept
drawn-
the sketchbook, thankfully,
Really?
for everything. Yeah.
for the museum that we hopefully will have in a couple years. For development with this game, it was my first time ever doing game development, and I was very much in the art category. And it wasn't like they weren't showing me anything, but just like that was what I knew and understood. So a lot of my work was developing the weapons. We did sort of. It was almost like a pixel art style, I would say, with the weapons.
Yeah.
And I believe, it's been a while, so please correct me if I'm wrong. I believe the weapons that I've made, you'll see as like the special move for.
They're all the legendary weapons. So like there's a lot in this. The way so like the way that combat works and that weapons work is that at the end of the first act, you're given your first legendary weapon for your class.
Right.
Did you ever play World of Warcraft?
Yeah.
Did you ever play World of Warcraft during Legion?
Yeah, actually.
See, do you remember the artifact weapons? How like
Yeah.
every class had 3 weapons for every spec. That's exactly how this works. So but we did that because we wanted it to be that if you play as a rifleman, there isn't only one way to play as a rifleman, and like so there are 3 different weapons that are all the legendary weapons for the rifleman, but they all raise different stats based on what you're trying to do. So like there's one that's really, really fast, but damage is low, or damage really high and speed is low. And because we wanted to give people as much freedom in how they build these things, because you have 50 plus different characters, like you can make any kind of party composition you can possibly think of. And every single party member has their own special abilities, which you can combo to things like, and we've seen some crazy ones with like what people can do. I actually, can you walk through here, Tyler? 'Cause this map took forever, literally forever. It's because I had to paint on the water shadow to make it look deeper. All of the grass that's along the like shoreline, it all had to be done in Photoshop because you can't do this in RPG Maker.
Really?
Yeah. It's, and also if you see if you walk under a tree, so that was something fun that I learned called parallaxing, where what you do is you have a front layer. So like the tree trunks are the bottom layer, right? And then if you walk behind the tree, the leaves are the top layer. So it looks like you're walking behind a 2-dimensional object. But I had to do that for every single tree that you could ever possibly walk towards. So think there's 1,000 maps base just for the bottoms, and then 1,000 maps on top of that because those are the top parallaxes for every single map. It was a lot. It was a lot of fun. I really, I really enjoyed this. Yeah, no, it's. I mean, it's one of the things I always tell people who get into video game design is that breaks are incredibly important, and I did not follow that at all when I was making this game. I mean, because with like video games and movies and music and any kind of like creative media, it doesn't always feel like work. Like you want to keep doing it. Like crunch is such a big problem in the video game industry, but it's not always imposed by the company. Like numerous times, I mean, Aseme is like prime example. I'm like, Aseme, you don't have to work all night. Stop. You don't have to do all this. And it's just because like you're gonna drive yourself crazy if you're just working all the time. I mean, like for me, I remember distinctly I had to get 200 maps done, and I had 3 days, and I just stayed up for 3 days straight and just worked on it nonstop. Ooh. And I got so horribly sick for like 2 weeks afterwards from exhaustion, and it's just like you need to not do that because it's not healthy, no matter how enjoyable it is. Because like this, I mean, this was a massive undertaking, and were I to do it again now, I think it would probably take me longer because I wouldn't be working till 4 o'clock in the morning every single night trying to do this. With Mass Effect being the main inspiration, one of the things that I wish it was easier to show all the different ones in here, but we wanted every companion to feel special. Like, whatever party composition you choose, you're going to have an interesting story, and they're going to have feedback, and they're going to, like, actually contribute to things. They're not just background characters. So, like, all of them, we had to build, like, storylines for all of them to make sense for what they do, and this was one of the first ones we ever worked on that it is this 8-part like side mission saga that was entirely based on the Yakuza series, and it was just so much fun to have, because that was Andre, worked with this guy Andre, who did a bunch of the writing for the side missions, and it was nice to have all these different ideas and concepts come in to be like, oh, can we do that in RPG Maker? And the answer is most of the time no, but sometimes you actually can, and it's like, I mean, especially with like really trying to learn the limitations of this. I mean, we have a there's a mini game, or there's a side mission here where you get shrunk down and you're fighting with inside of a mobile game, and it was like, how do we develop a mobile game with inside of RPG Maker that like has to take all these different things into account, and it's just interesting because you really can do a lot with it if you push it. But there really aren't very many RPG Maker games. Like one, and I don't necessarily think that's the fault of the engine completely. But like, I mentioned Steam Greenlight being such an issue for RPG Maker. I mean, there must have been so many games that would have just never had a chance, because if your game's made in RPG Maker, you're never going to get through Greenlight. The only reason we got through, because we had the exact same problem where we got to release, and I went through Greenlight, and it was just negative comments. RPG Maker trash, downvote. We're like, we're not going to get through Steam. All that work for nothing. It was right around when Steam was getting rid of Greenlight, so they were transitioning into their new thing, which is you pay $100, you're on Steam. Like that's like, of course they have like, they like watch things, and you can't just push anything, but like for the most part that was like, most restrictions are gone, but I was still stuck in the Greenlight process, and like our thing was going to expire, and I was like, on the day of release this was happening. It was like, it was going to expire and we weren't going to be able to release, and I'm like emailing every contact I can find for Valve, every support, every help. I find Gabe Newells on Reddit, and I'm like, you know what? I'm going to try. And I email him. 5 minutes later, pushed through, approved, immediately on Steam.
Wow.
And I'm not saying, there's no way to know that that's what it was, but I just think it's funny that literally 5 minutes after I sent that email, it got approved on Steam. So, and because like honestly, there was no way we would have gotten through otherwise. And even with the amount of stuff we have that isn't from RPG Maker, there's just no way.
Right.
And it's hard because like, where do you start as a game developer? Like, I mean, where do you really begin with any of this?
Well, I think today it's a lot easier for people to get into game development. I think it's sort of us talking about game development with other people, other like companies, other people in general. Like you have the person who's on YouTube doing their sort of startup indie experience and showing other people to go through it. But I think RPG Maker games of its like are a little bit harder to sort of come or sort of elevate itself out of all that all the crowd now, especially because so many people now are
and I mean it's like especially like you can make full video games within Roblox and Fortnite now. I mean there was somebody who we met at one of the game conventions who she was building a like colonial Jamestown simulator in Roblox.
Okay.
And it was sold for like $250,000. Like as like that Roblox game mode was sold for $250,000, and I'm like that's incredible. So like the opportunities I think are there, but would something like this have done well with all the stuff coming out today? I really don't know. I mean even this was our most successful game that we've made, but I mean this was an uphill struggle to get any kind of support for this. One of our biggest marketing blunders, and if you ever want to go and look for it on Instagram, do you know Chanel West Coast? She's on Ridiculousness, the MTV show.
Not off the top of my head, no.
Fair, totally fair. She, so the guy who did the music for us, he was pretty well connected with different people in the music industry, and he was doing Chanel West Coast's album, and he was like, "Oh, you should have Chanel West Coast promote the game. You're going to hit the right market. You're going to hit all the right people." And so I asked everybody, I'm like, is this a good idea? Should I do this? And they're like, yeah, why not? Let's see what happens. And so she made this. There is a post on Instagram still of Chanel West Coast in an Ashes of Kanaka like crop top and shirt and
right.
Everything. And it got like 100,000 likes, like tons of impressions and everything. Didn't lead to a single sale at all. None whatsoever.
I think that's like one of the harder things is that like you can do all this pushing, you can get someone with influence to put it out there, but it's like
if it's not the right person,
if it's not the right person, it's not going to get you what you're looking for typically. Like you can put so much effort and like love into a project, and really comes down to who do you reach out to just try to push it out, because you can always push out to your friends and then it'd be like, hey, please remember to like tell your friends, please. Like I made a project, please share it with our friends and with your friends, and have them share it with their friends, especially when you're like live in DC.
Yeah,
someone's gonna know someone.
And what's a shame is like that's not even viable now, because so with Steam, one of the hardest things is to when you go on Steam and in the top right it says if a game is very positive, mostly positive, negative. To get that metric, you have to have, I forget what the number is, but you have to have a set number of reviews. They can't be free. They can't have any relation to the developer account, and it goes like deep. So like I have a separate Steam account for Dogwood. I have played a game with my personal Steam account.
Right.
Anybody that is a friend on my personal Steam account, their review will not get counted for the metric.
Wow.
So you can't have any degree of relation with the reviews being written, or they don't count for the metric. And you've got to get like, we have, I think Ashes has like 15 or 20, and that's not enough. So it's like, and like to get even one review is hard. Like, I mean, to get somebody to buy the game one is difficult. And then to get them to write a review, like it's so hard. And it's just a shame, because I feel, I've met so many great game developers, and I've seen so many incredible projects, but it's just so hard, because if you don't have the marketing, you're never going to be able to get anywhere with them, because there's just so many games out there now. As good as it is that like Steam got rid of the green light process, you're now competing with anybody that has $100 and can make a video game. So it's a very saturated market, and that's we're always trying to find somebody to help us with video game marketing, because it's not just it's not just you can be good at marketing, like you have to be good at video game marketing. It's a very specific thing. And I mean, we've gone through 10, 11, 12 different marketing people and have not hit a single time on like any of our marketing campaigns. Man. So it's like, it's hard, and it's like, where do you find like support to make video games? And a lot of what we do now, and I got to do a lot of it in Ashes, is I love doing history projects. Right. And so we've done a lot of like educational experiences with video games, and I did a lot with Ashes. My like absolute favorite side mission in this game, and I hate to spoil it, but I don't think we're going to get to it in this in this playthrough. You find a guy who, he's like an Indiana Jones type explorer that's like, I've tracked this like satellite, I need to find it. We have, and like you meet him like 3 different times throughout the game in different corners of the world, and it ends up with the final one is this temple has collapsed, and he's in like the catacombs going through like the bodies, and like the temple's like, what are you doing? Like this is like sacrilege. And you end up finding that the satellite had crashed there, and it's the golden record from the Voyager satellite. Okay. And then and it's like, and then his whole storyline is now him protecting the golden record, because that's all we have left of Earth. And so I love doing that. Like that kind of stuff is amazing. And like, you know, I mentioned the Voyager, like NASA and the Smithsonian have a 3D modeling program, and they put their things out for free. Right. It's great. Like, I mean, if you want like any of the shuttles or any of the like rockets that we ever used in history, they're free 3D models. You can just download them and use them in your projects.
That is so cool. I didn't know that part.
Yeah, no, it's great. And I mean, like, it's, you know, they're like, it's limited in what you have, but like it's pretty cool that like the Smithsonian has the Hope Diamond is like fully 3D modeled. So if you want to include the Hope Diamond, you can. Or they have like some of the original space suits that you can include. Like there's tons of stuff. We just did a I'm really, I love getting to make video games, because I feel like we have done like some of the coolest, most interesting things. We're working with this vintage car museum up in Rhode Island called the Audrain, and we just did for their Auto Week, they have racing simulators. So there was a race that took place there in 1901. So we rebuilt the racetrack exactly as it was, and rebuilt the car that was raced there in 1901, so you can race this thing, and they have it in the exhibit, so you can see the real car, and then you can race the actual thing right next to it in the simulators.
That is so cool.
And we actually, the racetrack had been listed in the wrong place for over 100 years. We actually, because of NASA, that actually keeps really fantastic like height map data, you can layer it over like Google Maps, and you can find where things were. So because of NASA, we have the exact height data for what that track was, and we could import that into Unreal Engine. So the geography is exactly as it would have been if you were driving on the track for real, as it was 100 years ago.
That is actually really cool.
Yeah, and you and like I've seen people, like, you can do it for anything. Like if you're like, I want to make an island like game, you can just go on this site, grab like Cabo Verde, and you've got the whole map. You can just put it in as the whole, and it'll load all the geography and everything. You can scale it to whatever you want. Like, it's crazy what you can do with it, and like that's really fun for making landscapes. Anybody can do that because they just provide that for free.
That accuracy is a big part of, I would say, most of what RMR is. Like, how many different museums and different car shows you guys go to get accurate measurements and designs for the cars that you're recreating?
Yeah, it's been really nice that like nobody's really done a vintage racing game before. So like when I went to museums, they were like, oh, of course you can have access to our collection. It's been incredible, because like these are cars that are millions of dollars, and you'd never be able to do anything with them. And like, the museums are worried about the preservation of these cars. I mean, you know, for anybody that's into classic cars, you go to any Cars and Coffee or any cars show, and the median age is going to be 60 plus, and it's just like, and it's not that I think there's a lack of interest in the cars, it's that it's so hard to get into. I mean, you're looking at like a $50,000, if you're lucky, investment into this car, not counting what you have to do to fix it and restore it. And then like, you know, the race car that we had in that simulator, it's a $3 million car. Like, it's from 1901, irreplaceable. You will never be able to drive that thing. There is no way that you will be able to personally drive it. So this allows us to actually recreate them. And it's interesting because nobody's done it before. Like, it's so much trial and error we have to do in like Unreal Engine. I mean, we had to build a whole car system from scratch because modern cars can't read the information from these cars from over 100 years ago.
Right.
And I don't know, it's like looking back on like this and like what I could do in RPG Maker, what I could do now in like Unreal Engine with like with that is just crazy. And I mean, like, there's so much that it feels accessible now. Like, I'm really excited to see what people make in even the next coming years. I mean, Fortnite has a full game editor in it that's absolutely incredible. And like I like can't believe the things that like people make in that.
The development process itself has been really interesting to watch. I've only recently sort of like messed around with what it comes through that part of development when it comes through the program or the engine side. A lot of
he doesn't give himself enough credit.
Recently, I've actually been dabbling in a little bit of Godot. I've been using PowerPoint as some facsimile of an engine, which is already.
Would love to talk about that one.
I'm interested to hear that.
Well, there's a lot to learn because, like, growing up in Montgomery County, lucky enough to do a lot of things where they sort of like show all the kids, oh, this is how you use Word, this is how you use Microsoft PowerPoint.
Right.
So there's a lot amount of familiarity that I have with it.
Right.
But even like, there's aspects of PowerPoint that they continually update and iterate on that are necessarily like surprising to me. Like, I learned that you can put in FBXs into PowerPoint.
Yeah, you
What?
can full 3D models.
I don't fully understand why.
Okay.
But I can have a fully 3D rotating copy of like one of the cars from RMR in a PowerPoint if I wanted to.
Okay.
But because of all this and sort of learning some of the basics of understanding when it comes to like making a game, understanding what a hitbox is, understanding how to work around that or how different UI is displayed, a lot of it can be simulated in PowerPoint. And it gives me a lot more of appreciation for that. Now, whether RPG Maker or PowerPoint is better,
right?
Who would know?
It's just so crazy. And I mean, like, that's also like, I love being an indie studio because I feel like we get to do things like that.
Absolutely.
You know, work on like PowerPoint games. I mean, it's so bizarre to me. This was all from, I was on Steam's bestseller list a couple years ago, and all the best-selling games were anime visual novels. And I was like, why can't we do that? And then Aseme said, oh, this looks like what I used to make in PowerPoint. And I was like, what are you talking about? And it like, we haven't gone through Guinness or anything, but it is unofficially the longest viable PowerPoint ever created. It's like 1,500 slides, and it has and the entire thing is, so it's called Don't Fraud My Heart, and the entire game is you are playing as a tax auditor, and all of the love interests are the manifestations of office equipment. And so it's all of the games, and the entire story is based on my experiences trying to navigate business taxes. Okay. So all of the games are like problems I've run into and questions I've had, and like it's just been something, and like it's just been so fun whenever we like tell people about it because they love it. One of my favorite stories from this game, and to Aseme's credit, as I said before we started filming, his deep cuts are something. Like, his memory is incredible, and he will mention things that are so deep in like the recesses of my memory. I'm like, how do you remember this? So, do you remember the TV channel Boomerang?
Yes.
Okay, so we're working on the game one day, and Aseme starts singing to himself the Gorilla for Sale song, the Magilla Gorilla. Do you remember what do you know what I'm talking about?
Yes.
So Boomerang used to do these things in between the shows where they would do like music videos of with the shows, and there was Gorilla for Sale, and so Aseme's here. We got a Gorilla for sale, Magilla Gorilla for sale, for sale. And I'm like, what are you singing? And he's like, I just think this would be really great for Don't Fraud My Heart. And I was like, you know what? I'm gonna look him up, and I found the guy who I found an article because somebody did an article on with all the musicians who worked on those songs. There was like an Adam Ant one, and like a Josie and the Pussycats, and like a ska Jabberjaw song. Like, there were a lot of really weird ones. And they interviewed the guy who made that song, and I found him. He's still working. He's still active, and he even includes that song in his executive profile on his website. And I was like, well, I gotta ask him. And so immediately got back to me, and he was like, so I can't license you Gorilla for Sale because Hanna-Barbera owns the rights to it. But they're like, but we can do a very similar song. And like, Assemi and I are on a call with the guy who made that song, and I'm like, how did we end up here? But I mean, it's really crazy. This makes it very, like, a lot of people and things very approachable. Like, right. I mean, it's as soon as I say I make video games, it's so much easier to talk to people because they're a lot more interested. And especially with, like, when we would go to different video game conventions, I suffer from serious imposter syndrome because I'm like, who am I to, like, the Todd Howards of the world, Right. And it's like we went to E3 2016 back. This was with this game, and it was because we were like, I wonder if we can get free developer tickets because we're developers, and like E3 would give developer tickets. That was actually why we founded the company, because you had to prove you were a valid company to get into E3.
Right.
And so we went to E3 with characters that were hand drawn, scanned in. And we're meeting people from like Ubisoft and EA, and they're like, "This is so cool! Like, we want to see more. This is amazing." I'm like, "Are you really?" and they were all so nice. And like, these were like, because I think that year Battlefield 1 came out, so like it was the DICE developers, super right. nice people. I think Watch Dogs 2 was coming out, so we met those Ubisoft mm-hmm. developers. My absolute favorite, and this really, I really cannot stress how nice the people that make the video games are. Mm-hmm. There's a video game that I love so much called Mountain Blade, and Mountain Blade is still to this day one of the best-selling games on Steam. Like, it has persisted throughout time. Mm-hmm. It runs really well on anything, and it's a really complex, like, war simulation game. When I went to E3 the first time, in the back corner of the convention center, there was this corner booth that said mm-hmm. Mountain Blade 2. And I was like, oh my goodness, it's Mountain Blade. And this guy comes out, and I'm, this is my first time going to like a video game conference. I'm trying not to fanboy with this guy.
Right.
And he's like, well, we have our press-only demo. Do you want to come see it? You're the first fan we've met. And I'm like, yeah, like, absolutely, please. And these people remembered me. They continued to email me after E3, follow up with me, be like, hey, are you going to this conference? Every E3 I went to after that year, they let us in immediately, gave us the full demo, everything. And I had lost contact with them for a couple years when COVID happened. And right. right when the COVID lockdown started was when Bannerlord was supposed to come out. Out of the blue, I get an email from them saying, "Hey Sam, here's a copy of Bannerlord. We hope you enjoy it." I was like, and I hadn't spoken to them in years, and they remembered me and still sent me a copy of the game. That's incredible, and that's not an outlier. Like I've been very lucky with the people that I've met. I went to a wedding with my fiance, and mm-hmm. they sat me next to the one guy in a Star Wars tie, and the first thing he says to me is, "Hey, have you met our cousin who like puts on video game conferences? I think it's called E3." And I'm like, "No." And they're like, "Hold on." And so the night goes on. He comes over later, and he's like, "Hey, this is Missy, and she works for the ESA, the Electronic Software Association down in DC, the ones that put on E3. Right. She like had us in for a luncheon, introduced us to all these people. Like, it's nice because the support is there within the industry, but the biggest issue is getting projects funded, right. and it's like there's no real easy way for that. Like there isn't like, any connection I've made can't just go to like Todd Howard and say, "Hey, publish this game." It's right. There's so much to it, and there's no real easy answer on how to do it. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's why we've like pivoted a lot to doing these historical experiences, because I feel like there's a lot of opportunities to do stuff there and to actually get things made and happen. Right. But even then, it's hard. Like I really feel for people that are trying to do this brand new right now. Like mm-hmm. it must be so difficult to have nothing. Like we're fortunate that I'm able to like point to things and be like, I've done this and this and this, and I also say I'd been trying to find stuff for Dogwood for ages, and for anybody that is starting a video game studio, I hope that this story helps, because this was my experience of trying to get any kind of funding from Montgomery County. So my fiance's parents, they live up in Rhode Island, and they're on this island called Jamestown. It's a pretty small community, so they all know each other. And they were like, "How can we help Sam in his business?" And they're like, "Oh, you should go talk to Aiden Petrie." And I was like, "Oh, who's that?" And he's like, "Do you remember the easy button from Staples?" And I was like, "Yeah." And he's like, "Yeah, that guy." I'm like, "What do you mean that guy?" And he's like, he invented the easy button for Staples, and then invested all of his money and made like these biotech companies. I'm like, "What?" And like, yeah, and he lives on Jamestown. And he was like, "Yeah, have Sam come over. I'll like come talk to him." Super nice guy. And he was like, "You don't need much money." He's like, you can probably just go to Montgomery County and like find like a grant. Like there has to be something.
Right.
So I come back to Montgomery County, and I went to the Montgomery County Economic Development Corporation that we have, and they said, "We don't do grants anymore, sorry." And that was all I got. And I was like, okay. And so I went to the Treasury in Rockville, and they were like, "I don't know if we know anyone that does this." And then they introduced me to somebody, and he said, "Oh yeah, the office is in Frederick." I'm like, "Oh," so but like at this point I'm like, I'm not getting anywhere, so I just drive up to Frederick. I'm like, "Sure." And they're like, "We don't have anything to do with this. Why did they send you up here?" And I'm like, what do you mean? But they introduced me to, there's this organization called TEDCO that Maryland, I think they're like directly, like they're a branch like group that works with the Maryland government, but they do investments in technology companies. And they got on with us because when we were working on the remake for Ashes, we weren't happy with the AI capabilities. Like if you've played Mass Effect, like the companions feel like really fantastic characters. Like I wasn't able to get what I was happy with. So, like I wanted that like the characters have like food preferences and like they care what restaurants you stop in, kind of thing. So we started building this whole system for AI, and Maryland was like, "Oh, this is something that is tech related. We can help fund this," because it was a tech project. It wasn't specifically a video game. So being able to actually look at like how can we use this technology for things that aren't strictly entertainment video games has opened so many doors. I mean, we were very lucky, I have to say, because this was before ChatGPT ever came out. So like AI was still very, very, very new. And it was nice because after we got that grant, anytime somebody brought up AI, I could say, "Oh, I got a grant for AI development," and they're all like, "Oh, really? Oh, wow!" It was nice that we had that opportunity. But trying to find those opportunities is so hard. We've done. Tyler's helped me fill out dozens of pages of grant applications, and it leads to nothing. It's trying to even land something is so hard. But I'm always trying to guide people in the right direction. I love doing panels. I love going to MagFest and doing panels there. I always try and give one every year. And, I always have almost a full room. Like there's tons of people that want to make video games and they just don't know what to do, because if you want to work for a major studio, you're up against the toughest of the years of expertise,
a lot of
like
connections,
so much, and it's like you're gonna have such difficulty going straight from college into like a Rockstar or an EA or something. And it's like, well, then your options are either work for an indie company or you make your own thing. And most indie studios don't have any money, so it's like you're working for free for the most part. And you also, how do you know if that game's gonna get finished? One of the Tyler and I teach college classes up at Bristol Community College in Massachusetts, and like I always stress to people that like while I recommend getting on a game because having your name in the credits of a game is super important and can make a huge difference, but it's hard because how do you know if that game is going to get done? Like with this, I had made a D&D handbook. Like that was what I had made. Everybody that worked with me was just hoping that I was going to do this thing. Like there was no proof that I could do it. And I'm very lucky I had the people that believed in me work with me. But like, it's you're just hoping. you're just like hoping that you can actually get something done. Especially like, people held on for almost 2 years doing this because I think Ashes took about 2 years development. Tyler's going pretty fast through the story, so it's hard to get with. But the main premise is that Earth failed, and so humanity left on colony ships to a Earth-like planet. And one of the big things was, what I didn't like about Andromeda was that it didn't feel civilized enough. I didn't like that nobody had established anything. Like there was that one city of the new species,
right?
But like, I liked all the lore that they had built for all the different factions and races and everything, and then you just have none of it. And so with Ashes, this is supposed to be set like 150 years after we've landed. So cities have had a time to establish and build up, and you're dealing with a lot of urban environments.
Right.
But so you find out that there are other species on this planet. There's an alien species that goes by Terra, and then there's a sentient AI group known as Code. Very inventive.
Right, yeah.
And so you're trying to make sure that you keep control of the planet as you're going through the story. So I had a lot of it was building very distinct parts of the map. Like, I love map building. That is like one of my favorite parts of game development, is doing map building. And with this, it's like I had to build. There's this city, which I mentioned, it's a gambling Las Vegas style city that our writer was supposed to call. It was supposed to be the desert in Spanish, but he put too many S's, and so it is Las Postres. And none of us caught that until too late in the game, and I was like, you know what? It's Las Postres. It's the dessert of Kanaka, and so that's what we've gone with. But then I had to build. There's there's a whole storyline where this guy is messing with the weather of the planet, and so I had to build an entire snowy region, and like trying to get snow visual effects in RPG Maker was something, because like I had to build a whole separate plugin to do weather. But like I feel like that, like the people that have played this game have like hundreds of hours. Like there was this guy, he's a pastor from Kentucky, and when the game had been out for maybe like 2-3 months, he wrote me an email and he said, I love this game. It is amazing. He had like 500 hours on it, and it had barely been out. I was like, wow. And he was like, I wanted to help. Here are all the like typos I found. And I was like, I appreciate it. And it was like, but it was just this massive list. So it's like the people that get into it really get into it. And it's just, and like we wanted that because we want you to enjoy everything that's in it. I had to go, almost every single map, there is a hidden item. Somewhere on every single of these 1,000 maps is a square that you can click on, and there is a flavor text and an item.
Really?
Yep. Every single one. So, and we did, and like there's I did it because I wanted people to explore the map. So it's like, if I'm going to sit here and do all these things, people are going to explore them. But so I mentioned how we have the legendary weapons. We want them to work like the artifact system in World of Warcraft, where you carry them on like throughout the story. So you upgrade them with different materials that you find from fighting Terra and Code, and there are these medallions you have to find, and the medallions only come from hidden locations in the maps.
Okay.
But you only need I think it's 5 for the first one, then 10 for the second one. But it's to encourage people to look around everywhere. And it's just, I mean, there's so much. I mean, Tyler has, he's finishing up the first act in the first city. But I mean, it was just so much that because there are all the side missions and all the areas that open up once you finish the first mission. Because we really try to once you beat the first mission, everything really opens up to what you want to do. I think that was when we lost Tyler the first time, because it was once you beat the first act, you've got a whole side mission area opens up, and then there's the next act that has all these different areas. I really love making.
Oh, I love that design right there for the character.
Yeah, that was one of the best ones I think David ever did. I mean, it was a lot. I think it's 250 something portraits he had to do over a year. Yeah.
250?
Yeah, something like that. Because it's you got to think he's got variations of NPCs for every single region. You've got utility workers, so you've got like construction workers, cops, firefighters, like all these other things you got to fill, and then you have all of the named characters that all need custom portraits, and it's a lot. But I think it made a big difference. I'm really glad we had those instead of the base RPG Maker images, because it just, I don't want to say it's a sign of quality, because you could make a good RPG Maker game using what's in it, but it makes it look different enough if you have the custom characters, because it doesn't just all look the same. And I think that's really big. Is it's just, you got to think, if you're releasing your game out there, you have so much competition. There's so many other indie games out there. It's like, how do you compete? You have to have something that makes it like look really special and really stand out. It's just kind of gotten harder and harder over time, unfortunately.
I think it speaks more to the character that we put in most of our projects. There is some substance of uniqueness in everything we've done, or a lot of our projects are first time really stepping into a type of game style, or a type of sort of a utilization of a tool, or a utilization of an engine in a certain way. So a lot of it is similar to this, us putting in as much effort as we can to really show quality through that work.
We've never done the same thing twice, which I really love. Like, it's so much fun how you make me learn new things all the time. Well, I was going to say, it's really unfortunate the number of projects that didn't get to happen, like the ones that we've worked on and they didn't get released for whatever reason, because there's so many different variables of what can happen, like there was one that I love that we worked on called Death and Taxes, and amazing name, one of the best things I think we ever had for a video game. And the entire premise was that you were playing as tax collectors in the Dutch East Indies, and you were going to go foreclose on this mansion, and you get locked in, and you find out he's a mad scientist who started to raise the dead. So the entire premise is it plays like Call of Duty Zombies mode, but you're playing as like turn of the century tax collectors trying to fight off these different classic monsters. And like that was so much fun, because you think of like early firearms, like there are so many that were just terrible, and I was like, we have to include all the terrible ones. Like there was one that it was you had to have a rod attached to it to reload the gun, but the gun had a shotgun barrel, and if you fired the shotgun barrel, the like recoil would be so bad it would break the reloading rod off, and then you'd lose it in the grass, and you couldn't reload the gun anymore. It's just like, and so we had to include that, and we have that as a feature in the game, that you couldn't reload it after you fired the shotgun. But that game wasn't able to happen, and it's like, I remember I think we were working with a bunch of interns at the time, and like we weren't able to get far enough with school starting, and we had submitted to MagFest, and I think it got denied, so it was just like difficult to get that going. And it was like we had jumped into like 2 other games from that before we finally settled on the 3rd game we made, which was actually 4th game, which was Knife Fight. We made, so I was making a very complicated city builder that was called Principality. I had been up for days working on this thing, because like the whole concept was that it was a city builder, but you could also jump into a first-person RPG and play as the leader. And so it played like an RPG, and then you could go out and do the city building stuff. So I did all that, and Jimmy, our musician, comes by at Sam's, and he's like, okay, so what if you just scrap everything you're doing? And then he pulled out a fork and a knife, and he said, and then you have the fork and the knife, and then they fight each other. I was like, okay, sure. And so we started making Knife Fight, and it is literally a Super Smash Brothers style brawler where you play as kitchen utensils.
Okay.
And like that actually got made. That actually was finished and released and made. So it's like it's just, there's just so much variety. I think
Slime Despot was my favorite one that we just never really got off the ground. I think it was early in our use or learning how to 3D model, where we had this idea where rather than doing your normal sort of dungeon crawl adventure when you play as the party members, you're actually playing as the slime, and so the whole like customization and leveling
Reverse
up.
Darkest Dungeon.
Yeah.
The whole like customization and leveling up system would be based off of you sort of absorbing and reclaiming the leftovers from these like adventurers going through. And so there was like one night where we just went back and forth, I think over several nights, working over like what would a magic magical girl-esque slime would be after absorbing like the wizards' remnants of their like tools and things like that, and how would we like do multiple stages of this night slime, or how they would interact there. And I don't remember exactly what didn't get it super off the ground, but I think a great part is that even though we have a lot of these projects that are sort of the idea is still left on the chopping board, we are still continually working. We are still continuing developing things through.
We still have them all, which is what's nice. Yeah,
right up here.
Yeah, well, like I mean, we've like worked on so many, and like I mean, that one I can tell you was we had finished this game, and we were like, we don't want to use RPG Maker anymore, and we were like, well, what should we try and use? And we were working with Andre and his brother Jolo, and they said, oh, we should try CryEngine. And they're like, CryEngine has this thing where if you opt into using the most recent build when they release it, it's free. Because otherwise, at this time, CryEngine was $25,000 a user, which is just not reasonable for anybody to be able to afford. Right. So we did it, and the problem was that every time they forced an update, it made our build no longer usable. So they had to start from scratch like a dozen times, because every time CryEngine updated, they had to take the update and it broke the build. So it wasn't until we moved to Unreal Engine, and by that point we had moved past Slime Despot, that we like settled on that. I mean, and like there's like so much you can do. I mean, we were talking about earlier that like you can use it for like virtual production with green screens. Like you can use Unreal Engine to do all the different backdrops. I've used it for like the World Cup and stuff. Like you can use it for anything.
There was the virtual museum, right?
Yeah, we did a virtual museum experience. Like I worked with the ALS Foundation. This was a really crazy one because they had a camera that could track your eye movements, so people suffering from ALS could use computers with just their eye movements. And like it's really crazy when you think about being able to move like cursors and clicking on things with just your eyes. Right. And they were like, we only really have like chess. They're like, we want more exciting games for people to play with this. So we started building an infinite runner. And the way that it worked was that it was a ball, and then where you looked, the camera, it would move the ball to that space. Right. But we found the problem was that your eyes have so many micro movements that like it doesn't matter if you're like moving like this, your eyes are still jumping places. So the ball would keep moving all over the screen with all the and like you couldn't get it to actually like be in a reasonable position. But I mean, it was like that. I was able to freely like use that camera with Unreal Engine, and it worked. And it worked. So it's like I think it's very friendly to different tools and different systems you want to use it for. It's like I said, not just for games. You can use this for literally anything. I mean, we had I had an architecture program. We built this thing where like you could simulate how people would use different spaces based on HVAC values, and like that was built entirely in Unreal Engine.
I heard they can make PowerPoints now.
I don't know about that. I don't think it's quite as good as the PowerPoint yet.
Chalk another one up for Microsoft.
So what are some of your upcoming projects that you guys got?
So we have a couple. We're hopefully releasing in the next month or two. We have a game called Borderline, which we've been working on for the past year, and it is if you ever played Mirror's Edge, we wanted to build something like Mirror's Edge because we didn't think anybody really done anything like that in a while. And like I know, and it's strange because like people loved Mirror's Edge, like it was super popular, but that movement system hadn't really been done in like that like parkour style, and so we were like, oh, we should try and do that, and that's actually pretty soon to coming out. And it's built in the same universe as Ashes. One of the big things that we try to do is a couple of our games, they intersect into the story of Ashes. So it's like our third game, Static. It's a psychological thriller, but it explains the origin of code. And Borderline explains the origin of Terra. So you get both the faction storylines in those games. So, but Borderline plays very much like Mirror's Edge. We designed it so that you're in a city on Kanaka, and it's run by different megacorporations. So you're running missions against those different megacorps, and it randomizes the skyscraper every single time that you do a mission, so it's different every time. that you go in and do it. It's been a lot of fun. I've really enjoyed getting to work on that, and like there are so many things that Mirror's Edge did that people haven't done in so long that it's just interesting for us to try and figure out how they did it. Like one of the great things that Mirror's Edge did was, if you remember, their music transitions. Right. Like you think it would be ambient, and then you'd hit combat, and it would instantly switch, and you're like, oh, What they did was they had points that had like collision boxes, and it was all scripted. They knew when combat was going to instigate, so it's not based on combat instigating, it's based on where you hit a spot on the map. So we went, and again, this was like 2006, so now you can actually do it dynamically. So we have it where the music shifts dynamically based on whether or not you're in combat, because I can't script it, because all the buildings are randomly generated.
Right, okay.
So that's the big one we have coming out. I mean, we've been working on the racing game, which I should say it's at the Audrey Museum in Newport right now, but the exhibit ends on December 8th, and then we're going to be giving out the home version of that demo for free, so people can just play it from our website.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, we're trying to make it happen, but
right.
I don't know. That one's really difficult because whenever I tell people like I'm doing a pre-war racing game, people are always like, "Oh, that's interesting. No one's ever done that before." Like no one's ever been like, "Oh, whatever." You know, there's always like some interest there, but the problem is that it's still pretty niche. Right. Like, Tyler and I were very fortunate that we got to go to the DICE Awards. Was that 2 years ago? I think it was 2 years ago now in Vegas. And we met like incredible people. I mean, I got to meet Shuhei Yoshida, who leads indies at Sony. We met Chris Charla, who's head of id at Microsoft. Like all these these huge people. And the problem was that these big companies, they're like, we like the idea, but we worry it's too niche. And the thing is like, well, how do you show that something's not niche? Well, you have strong marketing, and you can show like a trailer with tens of thousands of YouTube views, and it's like, okay, how do you get that without the support of any kind of company to get so it's like chicken and the egg situation. So it's like we're trying to make it happen, but it's going to be the kind of thing where like somebody who's really into cars and really likes video games is going to be the one to make it happen, which is also what I would prefer. Like the vintage racing game is very much like a passion project. Like I love it, and like I love that we get to preserve these cars that honestly would be lost otherwise. And it's like if I was working with a major publisher, there would probably be a lot of changes. Be like, this isn't the best way to monetize this. I don't know if we want to do it. And like, that's not my main goal. My main goal is to make a good video game that like shows off these cars and the history with it. But that one is a to be determined when that's coming out. But definitely Borderline's the big one. We were considering bringing that, but it's currently in QA and testing. And knowing my luck, we would bring it here, and the whole thing would just fry your computer and just stop working completely. So I figured it was safer to bring Ashes.
My computer thanks you on that one.
Yeah, and I mean, I really would love to be able to remake this in 3D. Like, I mean, this Ashes is a phenomenal game, and like I made it, sure, but like truly, I love this project because so many different people worked on it, and I mean, in this party, the second Money is a real person. I miss Money so much. He was I lost contact with him. He was a guy who I met him on like Xbox Live or something, and he like stayed friends with us, but he was like the nicest guy in the world, and he lived in Flatbush in New York. And we always gave him a hard time because we were like, buddy, how, it's like we always called him Money and act like, he's so hardcore, like, and he's just this really nice dude living in this area. And so we included Money as this hardcore bouncer, and he's one of the companions in the game. But like, there's just so many things like that of like interesting stories that came up from the people that were working on it that made it just this whole experience. Like, it's not just me doing this, it was everybody that was working on it.
Well, thanks for joining us over here at Montgomery Community Media on the LootBox. So how can our viewers reach out or see what you guys are up to?
Yeah, so for any of our games, if you look up Dogwood Gaming on Steam, everything will pop up. That's where we do all of our releases. And if you want to wish list Borderline, that is on Steam right now, and you can find it there. But if you're interested in anything game development wise, if you want to talk about the studio or the company or anything we're doing, like, we have an email form on our website, which is dogwoodgaming.com. It's also where all our demos and everything will be. But also, if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me. I'm smartino@dogwoodgaming.com. And, all of our socials are Dogwood Gaming, so we're pretty easy to find otherwise.
Also on our website, there should be a link to the Discord. If you want to communicate with us, reach out, potentially partner with us for any sort of project you want to get into game development, or you want to partner with some sort of project or idea that you have. While we do not stream anymore, we should still have the backlog, some of our older streams, including development streams, if you want to see some of the work that we've done in game development from a lot of different angles and a lot of different slices of it. And while it'd be very rarely, we might pop in there every now and then, so checking us out there would be a good way to know what we're up to.
All right. Well, thank you guys for coming over here, and thank you guys for watching. We'll be right back.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks for watching our video. If you liked what you saw, be sure to check out the MCM LootBox. New episodes every month on the final Thursday and video on demand.